Thank you for joining today's open house hosted by the Institute of Politics and Public Service at the McCourt School of Public Policy, known to many as GU Politics. My name is Ellie Sims. I'm a junior in the college, double majoring in government and justice and peace studies with a minor in sociology. And I presently serve as one of the fellows co-chairs and on the student advisory board for GU Politics. And I previously served on Elliot Williams' student strategy team and as the team lead for Sochi and Host SST.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Whitehouse and I am a sophomore in the college studying economics and history, and I serve as the other fellows co-chair on the student advisory board. I've previously been involved in GU Politics on 2 student strategy teams, Mike Shields this last spring and Katie Harbath this last fall. Our roles as part of the Student Advisory Board are to help inform GU Politics programming for students across campus on both the graduate and undergraduate levels and assist GU Politics staff in fulfilling the commitment to helping students reimagine politics and public service. Our role is also to support the student strategy teams, or SSTs for short, for our fellows program. An SST is a small group of students that will be assigned to each fellow and will help them throughout the semester, researching for their discussion groups, promoting their sessions and speaking events, connecting them with other student groups and the rest of the campus community, and helping to drive the discussion group series. QR codes for the fall 2023 SST application are hanging around the room and are due this Sunday, September 10th at midnight.
Additionally, if you haven't gotten the chance to get to know our programs, we have a number of student ambassadors representing each of our initiatives along the side of the room. If you have any questions, you can ask the people who are usually sitting in those chairs. You can also scan the QR codes. And please feel free and join us on social media this afternoon by tagging GU Politics with @GU Politics on all social media forms. And now please join me in welcoming to the stage GU Politics Executive Director Mo Alathe in our fall 2023 Fellows class.
Hey everyone. Oi, Saxa. I love this turnout, and this is always one of my favorite days of the semester where we get to introduce to the campus our fellows for the semester.
We're just trying to figure out the seating, sorry.
These are people who are used to being staffed, so clearly. How many of you are new to GU Politics? Wow, what a great crowd. How many of you have been involved before, have been to past fellows, discussion groups, et cetera? Okay, this is awesome. I love this. So let me tell you what we do. The Institute of Politics and Public Service, part of the McCourt School, but open to the whole campus community, is here to do a couple of things. One, pull back the curtain, show you guys how politics and public service really work by putting you in the room with the people who actually do it. You are getting, in your government classes, in your policy classes, in your econ classes, getting taught by some of the most brilliant academics you'll find anywhere. But if you guys were anything like me when I came to Georgetown as an undergrad, one of the reasons you chose Georgetown is because it's here, right? It's in DC. And so what we're trying to do is break down the wall that separates this campus from the rest of the city and put you in the room with the people that help run this city for very real, frank conversations. Number 2, some of you may choose to go into politics or public service. If you were anything like me, when I was an undergrad, I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea how to get my foot in the door. I didn't even know what all the opportunities were in politics and public service, and I didn't figure it out until after I graduated, and I tripped and fell into starting to work on political campaigns. So a big part of what we do is help you guys figure out what opportunities are in public service, and then help provide opportunities to pick up some skills and the beginning of a network to help you guys start on your paths. And then third, democracy is facing a bit of a stress test. Regardless of where you are on the ideological spectrum, I think people can agree that politics isn't necessarily living up to its potential. Our motto here, our slogan here at the Institute is public service is a good thing. Politics can be too. But sometimes it's hard to see that. And so we spend a lot of time trying to figure out why. And one of the reasons I believe our democracy is facing a bit of a stress test is because we're so frickin' polarized these days. And one of the reasons I think we're polarized is because we all live in these filter bubbles where we surround ourselves by people who are like us all the time. Most of us live in neighborhoods, communities surrounded by people who think and sound like we do. We go to work or school surrounded by people who think and sound like we do. And our social media feeds are populated by people who think and sound like we do. We get our news from places that reinforce what we already think, to the point where we've isolated ourselves from other perspectives. And when we isolate ourselves from other perspectives, we tend to assign motivation to the other side. So one of the things we want to do is help you guys pop your filter bubbles to get a better understanding of the other side, whatever that other side may be, so that you become better advocates for your own perspective, by better understanding what you're up against. And by becoming better advocates for your own perspective, maybe you find common ground, but if you don't, maybe the process just works a little bit better. That's what we do. We've got a lot of different programs to help accomplish those goals. But the one we're going to be focused on today is our Fellows program. Every semester, we invite 6 people who are active in politics and public service. 6 people who have been in the trenches. These are people from politics, from the Hill, from the administration, from campaigns, from journalism, from all sorts of different aspects of politics and public service. They keep their day jobs, but they come every week to campus to spend time with you guys. They hold weekly discussion groups where each week, off the record, think of it like a cool seminar class, but no reading, no homework. Just the cool conversation. They hold office hours, they'll headline events, they'll do individual and small group mentoring, and we'll talk about all of those things at the end. But they are here to engage with you. They want to share what they've learned along the way, but they also want to learn from you guys how they can be better when they go back to their day jobs. So, every semester we've got 6 people, and I am so thrilled to introduce you all now to the Fall 2023 GU Politics Fellows. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to introduce each one individually. They'll tell you a little bit about themselves and why they're here and what their discussion groups are going to be about and when their discussion groups are. Then we're going to continue to have a little bit of a conversation, but then we're going to invite you into the conversation to ask any questions, make any comments, challenge anything that they've said, agree with everything I've said. And then afterwards, there'll be some time for us just to kind of hang out and mix and mingle. So, starting to my left, your right. So I was SFS as an undergrad. I wanted to go into the Foreign Service. And then my senior year, I learned that the people who wrote the Foreign Service exam apparently had other plans for me. But I've always been fascinated with the intersection of foreign policy, national security, politics, and communications. And so I could not be more thrilled to introduce you to Emily Horn. Emily served as the spokeswoman for the National Security Council under President Biden, the first 2 years of the administration, almost.
Half-ish.
A little bit more. So she was there for some pretty heady stuff, as you all might remember. But she's had lots of other cool roles, including having been head of policy communications for what was then known as Twitter.
The artist formerly known as.
The artist formerly known as. So Emily, welcome to Georgetown. Tell us what you'll be talking about.
Thanks, Mo, and thank you all for being here. You could be doing anything right now on this, your second week of classes? First week? Second. So you could be absolutely anywhere. You are all brilliant students with the world in front of you. And I'm here in large part because I want to be learning from you. So this semester, we are going to be talking about, make sure I get the name right, contemporary national security in the press is what we're calling it. This is a conversation about how do narratives around foreign policy get made? What's the sausage making behind the scenes? How do reporters, how do government spokespeople, how do industry, how do foreign interlocutors all work together to craft a narrative of US foreign policy? And then how does that narrative itself become a part of shaping foreign policy? And we'll talk about this in a lot of different methods. Mo mentioned my time at the NSC, so we'll do some case studies from there, including looking at, among other things, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Afghanistan withdrawal. I look forward to your thoughts on how we could have done perhaps either one of those differently. I'm sure we'll have some robust conversations there. But Mo also mentioned my time at Twitter, and we're going to have a really interesting conversation, I hope, about the role of social media platforms and how those have shaped an information environment that is increasingly beset with misinformation and disinformation, which brilliant students like yourself know are fancy terms for lies. So how do we sort out who gets to shape that narrative, who gets to use that narrative, and ultimately who decides how that narrative impacts US foreign policy? Really excited to be here, and thank you, Mo, and to the entire team for the warm welcome. It's great to be with you all.
Chair.
Oh, most important thing, they told us to tell you all, and of course I immediately forgot. Wednesdays at 2 p.m. And if you cannot make that time, please come and sign up for office hours. I'm happy to meet with you all individually and really look forward to getting to know you all and learning from you this semester.
Thanks, Oli. So as some of you know, before I came back to Georgetown 8 years ago to launch the Institute, I spent 20 years working in democratic electoral politics. I was a communications guy, a total flack and hack. And so I spent a lot of time with pollsters over the years. And one of the things that I learned was you have two kinds of pollsters. You have those who spin data to tell you what you want to hear, and those who just tell you what the data says, the good and the bad of it. And the second was always far more important to me, even when it wasn't as pleasant for me. And I especially later in my career, really enjoyed getting to know Republican pollsters. As a Democratic strategist, I loved being off the record, just sitting around and talking with Republican pollsters to kind of see what the data was telling them in order to help me better understand what I was seeing out there. There are a handful of really good Republican pollsters out there. And I was so fortunate, I guess, just less than 6 months ago to be at a conference and to meet one of the best. Someone whose name I had been hearing for years, who had been working for some of the biggest names in Republican politics, people who I'd never agreed with but respected, tended to be the people that she would sign up for. And so when she told me that she was interested in exploring the fellowship, we jumped at the opportunity. Brenda Giannini has worked for people like President Bush, Senator McConnell, Congresswoman Liz Cheney, and many, many others. Brenda, welcome to Georgetown.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And I echo everything Emily said. I'm very excited to be here, excited to see this robust group. We do look forward to learning from you. As Mo likes to say, this is the generation that's going to clean up the mess that we made, and it's very true. But yes, so I am the data nerd on the panel. I know I don't look like a data analyst because I'm so tall. Kidding. But it's proof that any one of you can get into data analytics. You've all got it in you, and I believe it. But that's what my group discussions are going to be on. And we're going to be talking about the intersection of data and politics. Data has become so important to campaigns right now. Data always has a front row seat in all of the strategic decisions that are made. And I always like to say, I have the best seat. Everybody else gets to opine and talk about what they think is true. I'm the voice of the voter in the room. So it's really it's a great place to be. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that in our discussions, how it's used, when you should use data, when you should ignore data. This would be Liz Cheney example. Also, I know you've heard a lot about polling. We're going to talk about what's the difference between a campaign poll and a media poll. Yes, there are trash polls out there, but you can believe in the industry, and I'm going to show you how to spot a good poll and a bad poll.
And when?
Oh, and I'm Mondays at 4 p.m. Great way to kick off the week.
There you go. Thanks, Brenda. So, yeah, we can, please clap. Please clap, as Deb Bush would say. So during my political career, one of my favorite parts of my job as a press secretary and a communications director and a message guy was to argue with reporters. And I was good at it. I loved calling up reporters and yelling at them and let them yell back at me. And the push and pull of trying to get the storytellers to see the story the way I wanted people to see the story. And there's a lot of tension there oftentimes between people in politics and people in the media. Nia Malika Henderson was someone I never felt that tension with. I'm trying to remember when we actually first met, but we've intersected in politics so many times, whether it was her covering a campaign I was working on, or us being on the same CNN panel. Nia's a person that I always respected because I knew she wanted to get the story right. She wanted to give her viewers a true sense of what was happening. I didn't always, and still don't always agree with her analysis, but I know where it's coming from, and I always felt that we could have an honest conversation. Nia is someone I've been trying to recruit to come be a fellow for several years, and each time she would blow me off, but finally got her at a time that worked for her. Nia, thanks for being here.
It's so great to be here, and thanks to you all for coming. I'm so excited to chat with you, to meet you over these next many weeks. My discussion group is going to be about the 2024 presidential campaign. It'll be based week to week on whatever is happening on the campaign trail. And as you've seen from campaigns before, that could be any and everything. I'm expecting that this is a campaign that's going to be very unpredictable, just like the last couple of campaigns that I've covered. Ideally, I'll bring in some folks from CNN to talk to you about covering campaigns, about the issues in the campaign, the GOP debate, for instance. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about polls. Are polls to be believed? Maybe you'll be a guest. Another issue, often the press has gotten it wrong, gotten campaigns wrong, gotten election results wrong. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about fact checking. We'll talk about some of the issues, the sort of terminology around being woke, for instance. My discussion group is going to meet on Tuesdays from 2 to 3:30. Would love to see you all there. And obviously, if you can't make that, then I'll have office hours as well.
Thanks. I'm not a Hill guy. I'm not a policy guy. My brain was never wired for that. I can't believe that I got hired by a policy school. But I have always respected people who made their careers on Capitol Hill. It is an institution that is run by incredibly hardworking, ridiculously underpaid individuals who give up so much of themselves in order to represent people all over the country. And I'm fascinated by people who make that their career. It's also a place where politics and policy intersect and actually oftentimes collide. A few months ago, I was at a reception, one of DC's many receptions, and was introduced to a guy who was a chief of staff for a conservative senator, or had just left, I think, at the time. And the first words out of his mouth upon being introduced was Hoya Saxa. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get along well with this guy. And began a really interesting conversation with Joe Hack, former chief of staff to Senator Deb Fischer from Nebraska, headed up the Senate Republican Chiefs of Staff Working Group, right? So the guy that helped create a structure and an organization, a support network for all the Republican Chiefs of Staff in the Senate, which means he got to see a lot of different people and a lot of different styles. Has since left and is now in the private sector, doing government affairs and government relations. Joe, welcome home.
Thank you, Mo. Thanks, guys. As Mo said, I am a Hill guy and I am a Georgetown guy. And this really was my first home. New South was my dorm freshman year. So just upstairs, first floor, New South 120. I remain amazed that Harbin is still standing and has not been torn down yet. So my condolences to those of you in Harbin or Darnell. No, but it really is very special for me to be a part of this program and to be back on the hilltop. My almost 20 years in Washington have largely been spent on two hills, Capitol Hill and Georgetown. So hopefully I can share with you some of the experiences I've had. My discussion group is going to focus on the different pathways of public service. I tried to come up with a really catchy name, how to survive and thrive in this messed up, magical place called Washington. And as I thought about it, I put myself back in your chairs and was wondering, if I were 18 years old again, what do I wish I would have known about the various opportunities that are available and how you can be prepared to take advantage of them, and sort of what the real nitty-gritty is like in these jobs. So each week we'll explore a different path of public service or politics, talk about what's really entailed and how you might set yourself up to pursue a career in that space. So I am on Tuesday at 4 o'clock and hope to see you guys there. And if that does not work for your schedules, would love to visit with you during office hours or otherwise. So thank you, Mo.
Thank
for
you.
having me.
If you have spent any time at all in Democratic politics, you know the name Cristobal Alex. This is a guy who is a living legend in the industry, and someone who Democrats are constantly seeking out for their advice. We just met a few months ago, which is crazy because we've known all the same people, operate in the same circles, but I have followed your career. Cristobal has done a ton of different things. He was the founding president of the Latino Victory Fund, an organization dedicated to electing more Latinos to office. He caught the notice and the attention of a lot of different people in that role, got to know then former Vice President Biden, who then made him one of his first hires on the Biden campaign in 2020, literally one of the first hires on that campaign. And after getting elected, went into the administration as Deputy Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary and that shop are the people that organize all the other cabinet secretaries, right? All the actual cabinet secretaries. And then he left and went into the private sector after he left the administration, though I don't think your involvement in politics is over. There's new stuff coming out pretty soon about you, right? About your involvement. So stay tuned next week for a big announcement. And he'll be here on the hilltop when that announcement's made public. Just a guy I have tremendous amount of respect for and whose reputation and work and dedication to politics as a form of public service precedes him. Cristobal, welcome.
Thank you. A real honor to be with you all, and a real honor to be with this incredible badass panel, this cohort. Mo, I don't know how you let me sneak in here. And thank you to Mo. That was one of the kindest introductions I've ever had. And just seeing you in action is also amazing. We're going to learn a lot from each other. I can't wait to learn a lot from you. And what most interests me is sort of this intersection, Mo, that you've created between politics and public service, because to me, I think of them as the same thing, right? They intersect in a special way. And what I'd love to talk to folks about in the discussion group that we've got is really, how do you build a presidential campaign? So on Thursdays at 2 o'clock, if you can come by, we're going to take it step by step and on building a campaign and dealing with the tough issues that candidates deal with. And maybe some of you one day will want to run for president. And to me, I think both politics and public service is very personal, right? Like there's a reason why you all are in this room. There's a reason why these incredible leaders are on this stage. Something has drawn us to it. For some folks, maybe they care so deeply about the environment, they want to run for office or run an organization. For others, maybe they want to be president because they've got like almost 100 charges against them and they want to pardon themselves, right? Or they care about democracy. And like, Mo, just take it one step further. That is something that I worry a lot about. And I would say that democracy is really teetering right now on a precipice. And we'll be talking about that too. And for me personally, you mentioned Latino Victory Fund. My parents were immigrants. My mom came from Mexico, was a migrant farm worker and settled in El Paso. And when my brother Richie, and I have one older brother named Richie, when we were born, she wasn't, toiling in the fields picking cotton anymore, but she was still working 3 jobs so that we would have a chance that she never had, that opportunity, right? And I think a lot of you come from similar backgrounds and are looking for that chance and looking to make your parents proud. And, what drew me to politics and public service is really being on the playground one day. My brother is a person with autism, very highly functioning. He was a little older than me, and we were, running around at recess. The bell rings, we're all coming back, and some bully pushed my brother down to the ground. And a group of boys was standing around him. We were, 9 and 10 or 8 and 9, and I just froze. Like I didn't do anything at that moment to help my brother. I wasn't yet buff like I am today. I was scared. I don't know what happened. And I tell you that because it has left me with this feeling of like shame or embarrassment or whatever it is. I can't even think of the word for it. And I said, I would never let somebody push my brother down to the ground again and not do anything about it. And that's how I think of politics, and that's how I think of public service, and that's what I look forward to chatting with you all about.
Awesome. And did you tell them when you're...
Yeah, Thursdays at 2.
Thursdays at 2. Okay. When I was sitting where you guys are as an undergrad at Georgetown in the 90s, one of the hottest shows on television was The West Wing. And we all sat around and waited for it to come out each week, because that's actually how we used to watch television, right?
That's right.
Waited for it to come out each week. And it was such an aspirational picture of what politics and public service could look like. The presidential campaign that took place when I was an undergrad was Bill Clinton's first election, Hoya Saxa, Mr. President. And I remember watching him go on the late night shows, playing the saxophone on Arsenio Hall, or going on MTV News Student Town Hall to answer questions about whether he wore boxers or briefs. And over the years, I've watched many other depictions of politics in culture and politics in entertainment. We've kind of gone a long way since the aspirational depictions, right? Scandal, House of Cards, Veep, which is hilarious because it is the most accurate of all those shows, right?
It's a documentary, that's
We all know. Every one of us knows every character on Veep. And increasingly, especially young people, getting their news from places like The Daily Show, as opposed to CNN, right? Like, that intersection of culture and politics is so fascinating to me. Our final fellow that I'm going to introduce has lived at that intersection for his entire career. Craig's the guy I've known the longest, I think, on this stage, going back to the 2008 presidential campaign. He's a guy who's worked in the entertainment industry. He has worked in the White House. He has worked on campaigns. He has worked in philanthropy. He's currently the Chief Communications and Content Officer for the Clinton Foundation. He's been with President Clinton for many years. But his real hustle these days, I would argue, is at his consulting firm. He consults for places like HBO and many of the late night shows. And so this is a guy who has spent his career advising people on both sides of that divide about the other. And so Craig Manassian, we're so excited to have you to have a conversation that we've actually never really had here before.
Well,
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary. And thank you to my fellow fellows. I've already learned a lot just spending the day with them, and I'm looking forward to discussing topics and learning from you. And as many people here said, thinking back to when I was in college and trying to think about what I wanted to do, and I thought about a few different things, all sort of related to service, politics, going into either entertainment or news and whatnot. And I, as Mo said, I've been able to sort of weave a career out of doing that. And one thing I learned, I think probably all know who've worked in politics, is that most people, or many people, get their perspective and how they feel about issues not from the news. They get it from social media, they get it from late night shows, they get it from West Wing or Scandal, they get it from documentaries, they get it from podcasts. So we're going to be talking about that intersection, and both if you want to go into those careers, what to know about it, also how some of the most important political debates happen in pop culture. I mean, just in the last couple of weeks, there were a lot of things to talk about at the first Republican presidential candidate debate a few weeks ago. Very first question about a country song called Rich Man North of Richmond. Funny, interesting they would talk about that, but it speaks to how a country song, and that was a self-released one at that, was influencing the political debate so much it had to be the first question. We just saw, whatever you think of him, a former president who came to the consciousness of the people through a reality show. That reality show, probably people didn't expect at the time, shaped how large voting blocks thought about this particular candidate. So we're going to look at factors like that, and even Barbie. You know, there's a tremendous debate about Barbie, about where it fits. Is it there are critics of the message. There are others who find it empowering. I don't think Mattel set out with that idea when they talked about making a Barbie movie that so many years ago, but it's turned into this cultural phenomenon. And I guarantee you that'll be something you'll see referenced on the campaign trail next year. So we're going to look at all those factors. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have guests. We're going to do a simulation of what it's like to write a late night show, where you will be in the writer's room trying to figure out from the day's news how to make it funny, how to make the rundown, and what it takes to do that. And we'll look at a lot of these cultural forces. So I'm really excited to be here, learning from you, learning from everybody else, and hope you get something out of it. And hope to see you Thursdays from 4 to 5:30 for the discussion group or for office hours. Really, really happy to be part of the campus community. So thank you for being here.
Okay, in a moment, I'm going to invite you guys up to the mics to ask whatever questions you have. But I just want to ask one while we set the mics up, and you guys can feel free to start lining up if you'd like. Look, it is clear that all 6 of you, all 7 of us, are passionate supporters of politics and public service, right? We all believe in it. It's in our bones. And yet people hate it, right? On a good day, Congress's approval ratings might be in the teens. You have the 2 leading presidential candidates with approval ratings I saw today in the mid to high 30s. People trust the media, maybe on a good day as much as they trust politics. Like, this isn't hyperbolic. I actually have seen polling. You might want to validate this if I'm off or if I'm right. But where I have seen diseases that are less unpopular than Congress.
The tobacco industry is more popular than Congress.
So we all know it. We all love its potential, what it represents. What are we doing wrong? Why do people not trust or like politics and public service? Let's start with the pollster.
No. Well, I think so. One of the great parts about being a pollster is you also get to travel the country and talking to real voters. They're talking to people like you that actually influence, decide elections. And the reoccurring theme is really bad behavior. They see Congress as children. People are worried about things that are happening in your life, right? Am I going to be able to get a good job after I just spent a fortune on this excellent education here at Georgetown? Families are worried about, how am I going to send my kids to school? How am I going to get, the next meal on the table? I'm worried about getting my kids to soccer practice. They are not worried about Hunter Biden and how he bought his gun or what's on his laptop. They're not worried about, do we need to go through another impeachment trial? They really just see DC as such a circus. And to be honest, it's a circus that we perpetuate because it turns voters out. But it just is seen as such a massive failure. And that's why we've seen such an increased trust in business, even among the Democratic Party, very interesting flip happening there, because businesses are seen as solving people's everyday problems where DC is seen as failing. Oh, come on.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
A Democrat has to weigh in.
Cristobal?
I think that's the hardest question. Part of it is about values, right? So if you put up on the screen, we were talking about this in the green room a little while ago, if you're looking at CNN or MSNBC or whatever it is, and you're right, that the screen image keeps coming back to Hunter Biden's laptop or charges against the former president or bad polling. And people are still, I think, a little shook from COVID, right? Like there's a feeling, the best way to describe it for me is like there's a feeling of we're not settled, we're unsettled as a society. And because we go to our own corners and we get our news from these bubbles that you've been talking about, we get further and further polarized. And it's harder and harder to break through and bring the country back together, right? And I have to tell you, I'm an optimist and very naive. I did think that the last election was going to change that, after like an attempted insurrection, after a coup, attempted coup, after the worst pandemic we've ever seen, and it's only gotten worse, right? And so I do think, for me, the greatest hope that we've got are you all, sitting in this room, right? The next generation of leadership is going to have to be the generation that pulls us out of it. Not that we've completely screwed it up, but we're pretty close to having screwed things up. But there's still enough of a framework to strengthen and to build from. But we've had some real struggles with it. And I think, Mo, that's the toughest question.
And one of the things I think life is very hard for people. I am dealing with a sister-in-law who has stage 4 cancer. I've been texting with my mom because my sister has a mental health challenge and seems to be maybe spiraling out of control. And I feel like politicians don't make life easier. They don't actually address the problems that people have every day, whether it's the price of healthcare, the price of daycare. I have a 3-year-old, and her school is exorbitantly expensive. And so I feel like there's lots of talk, there's lots of promises. The media obviously covers just a slice of sort of DC chattering classes conversation, but they don't really give a sense of how people actually live and what the struggles are. And I feel like politicians don't really make people's lives better, even though every 2 years Congress is up and they make promises about how they're going to make people's lives better. Presidents every 4 years, senators every 6 years, governors, local politicians, and people are dealing with the same problems, and they're not really getting any better despite all of the attention and chatter from politicians. So I think that leads to a great deal of distrust from people who hear the same people get up and talk about problems but don't actually make people's lives better.
Joe, what are your thoughts on that? Or is that just fake news?
No, I agree. I think also I remind people, though, that Congress doesn't exist in a vacuum. It very much is a reflection of the country. And right now, the country is very divided. And there's different reasons for that, whether it's a rise in tribalism generally, or the impact of social media, or as Mo described earlier, everyone sort of living in their own echo chambers. I think those all are very powerful forces that I don't quite think we've learned how to reckon with. But the toxicity here in Washington is, it's a symptom. It's not necessarily the problem itself. And so I think we also need to take a hard look at ourselves and our country and our communities, and demand more of our leaders, but also I think it starts with us a little bit. I don't think it's totally fair to just always blame Washington.
Emily?
So I'm a communications person, and I approach that prompt through a communications lens. And when I think about how we have changed how we communicate and engage with one another in my adult life, a theme that keeps coming back to me is that it's much easier now than it was when I was the age of many of those in this room to take something out of context, to strip it of its meaning, and to launder it in a bad faith way. And where Mo and I think sometimes differ is where he talks about polarization and many others in DCT. I don't mean to pick on Mo. What I think about is, are you engaging in good faith or in bad faith? And if you're engaging in bad faith, that can take any number of forms. Are you looking to reaffirm your priors? You're asking a question because you want to dunk on someone. You're asking a question because you're not really interested in the answer. You're interested in how it reaffirms your worldview. That is, I think, endemic across the political spectrum, and it's something that has been, I think, aided by the ability to engage with information absent of humanity, absent of context, absent face-to-face conversations. When you're talking with someone virtually or over a social media platform or in an artificial setting that doesn't let you sit down and have an honest, trusting conversation, it's that much harder to reach to a point where you can say, even if I fundamentally disagree, I can understand where you're coming from, and we can agree to disagree and move on with our lives, having had this conversation. Now, I don't mean to say that this is some halcyon day in the past where we were able to do this and now we can't. I think we still have the capabilities to do it, but there's no question we are living in an information environment and a political environment where all the incentives are engaging in bad faith, cater to your base, reaffirm your priors, because you're held accountable or said you were wrong if you show vulnerability, if you show an openness to growth. I've seen this in my career as a government spokesperson. You're working with imperfect information, and when you come out with something better, the reaction often from our friends in the press, from our friends on the Hill, from our political adversaries, from foreign governments is not, okay, you've got new information. I can see how you've updated that. It's, why didn't you know this before? Why didn't you do this differently? And if those are important questions to ask in order to hold elected officials and those who are in positions of power accountable. But when you start to apply that adversarial sort of behavior to your day-to-day conversations, you lose opportunities to learn. You lose opportunities to grow. And it's something that I hope your generation is able to check all of us on as we are having these kinds of conversations.
Is there room for a West Wing in today's culture? Could that be a hit show? Or, because when I look at the fact that you got Scandal and you've got House of Cards were hit shows, and the most generous take on politics was Veep, or the late night comedy shows, which were all satirical. That was the most right?
I hope there's room. I think there's room. I do think one point the rest of the panel was getting to, I think, is that a factor in polarization is isolation. And that means we're looking at just the media we care about, the social feeds just that we care about that reinforces our point of view, talking to people. And COVID exacerbated this, right? There was a whole time where we were forced into isolation. And as President Clinton says all the time, the reason storytelling is so important is to understand somebody else's story. And if you understand someone else's story, you understand more about them, and then you can break down these barriers. And so at the best, the West Wing or other shows does that through storytelling. They make you care about people who you might otherwise not think about, and therefore that can lead to an understanding, because everyone's family goes through health issues. Everybody goes through economic challenges. Everybody who is a parent or a student is worried about, are they getting a good education? Somehow those have all been exacerbated. And I do think there's room through entertainment to help bridge some of those gaps, but it takes the desire to do it too.
Okay. Let's go to you guys. Take to the mics, and we'll try to squeeze in as many as possible. Julia, I don't know where the time card is, but if someone could just. Okay, let's start here, and then we'll go back and forth. And tell us your name, school year, where you're from, and then your thought as concisely as you can, or your question.
All right. I'm Sebastian from, or at McCourt and from Germany, and I wanted to know, or attaching to what you were saying, Mr. Hack, do you believe that the country is divided in the sense adjective divided, or is it being divided by politics, by media? Is it more primordial or more manufactured, the division within the country?
I think there's organic roots to it, whether it's sort of economic disassociation, people feeling left behind. There's huge, obvious battles culturally right now among different segments of the population. That is all, of course, exacerbated and exploited by politicians for their gain. And so I do think some of this is a result of different factors, but there's no doubt in my mind that Washington throws a lot of gasoline on the fire.
We do polling on polarization at the Institute. It's conducted by a bipartisan team of pollsters. And to your question, I think this is so fascinating. We asked this question, do you want more civility in politics? And like 93% say yes. But then when we asked the question a little bit differently, agree or disagree with the following statement: common ground and compromise are goals we want our leaders to aspire to. Right? Common ground and compromise. About 78% say they agree with that, which would say the country is looking for people to unite us. Literally the next question, agree or disagree. I am tired of leaders who compromise on my values. I want them to stand up and fight the other side. 73% say they agree with that. Right?
They want a fighter.
The question is, or what it seems to me when I read that is, I totally want you to find common ground. As soon as you come over to where I'm standing, we'll be on common ground. How do people in politics navigate that, right? What is it that their voters are asking for? Because I'll say this, I'm a Democrat, but I believe in the power of the markets, and the political marketplace is driven by voters, right? That's their job, is to listen to their voters.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm also a student in the McCourt School, and thank you for our sterling panel for being here. But I actually want to ask you about the less sterling parts of you. Cristobal did a great job of being vulnerable and telling us about a mistake or a regret he has. If there's any other panelists that are brave enough to say about a really stupid time in their career or a really big mistake or a time they really messed up that doesn't show up in the geopolitics emails selling us on you, that would be really great to hear about as candidly as you can talk about it.
Nope, Cristobal's the only one who's ever screwed up.
The session's only like an hour, right?
Anyone want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think 2016, CNN got it wrong. Lots of pollsters got it wrong in terms of the way we were reading the polls. And, I think most of us went into that night, including folks like you, Democrats, certainly went into that night thinking that Hillary Clinton was going to win. I remember talking with Van Jones before we were going on set, just about, we kind of talk about our talking points, or, what kind of reporting are you doing? Who are you talking to? I was talking to folks in Florida about what it was looking like on the ground there. And yeah, I was prepared to go on and talk about the ways in which Hillary Clinton was able to recreate the Obama coalition and yada, yada, yada. And obviously, none of that happened. And I remember that night, at the beginning of the night, you were sort of texting with people. I remember I was texting with Karen Finney early on, and things sort of looked good for Hillary Clinton early on. And then as the night went on, Democrats kind of stopped responding, right, to my text messages because it started to look bleak. So yeah, I mean, I think the press, pundits, reporters, pollsters, a lot of folks had eggs on our faces after that campaign. And in some ways that was repeated a little bit in 2022 as well, with the coming red wave that never really materialized. And so, that's something I think we'll probably talk about in my discussion group. What is it about, whether we're reading polls wrong, whether pollsters are wrong, whether we're just in a bubble in DC and we don't actually know what voters are thinking and feeling, and then we get on air and sound like we're the smartest people on the planet, and we don't know what the hell we're talking about. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that was a real series of mistakes in 2016, and you saw some of that, I think, in 2022 as well.
Brenda, were you about to say something?
But come to my class for that, to how to read polls and find a crappy poll.
Yeah.
But mine was 2016 as well. So I'm a pollster. I travel around. I'm supposed to have my finger on the pulse of America. My mistake was 2016 as well. I worked for Jeb Bush. Didn't really follow the pulse of the American electorate there. So I think that was my biggest miss. We did see how close that race was going to be internally. But I did not realize the anger within the Republican Party till well in that primary. We did not see Donald Trump coming. That was a surprise.
I think there's one interesting thing about campaigns generally, is for almost everyone who's worked on campaigns, certainly me, we've all had losses, probably more losses than wins. And so you can spend all day going back through those losses and saying, if I did this, if I did this, if I anticipated that. So there's a million stories we could tell you about things that went wrong.
Thanks for the question. All right, let's go over here.
Hi, my name's Will. I'm a freshman in the college from outside of Nashville. My question's for Ms. Horn. How has the rise of social media and increased calls for government transparency impacted the job you do, especially with the need to protect sensitive intelligence and maintain operational security?
It's a great question. Thank you. How much time do we have?
Yeah.
It's dramatically changed the way that government spokespeople do their jobs. I was in government at the end of the Obama administration and prior as a career civil servant. And then when I came back into government as a political appointee under Biden, my relationship with social media was completely different than it had been in my first stint in government. In particular, the speed at which things would move. And I had to be active on platforms as a spokesperson that I had previously been passive on. When I was first in government, I used Twitter as a news aggregator. And having to be out there as a spokesperson on platform was an absolutely essential part of the job when I was in last time. You can't wait for the 2 p.m. briefing. You can't even wait for, I would call a CNN colleague and say, you guys are running something that is incorrect. I need you to update the Chiron now. You can't wait for that. There's not time. And I remember, to the consternation of some of my friends in Legacy Press, having to say, and just so you know, I'm gonna have to quote tweet you that thing that you just put out is not accurate, and I'm gonna have to quote tweet you. Sorry about that. I know that's gonna be egg on your face, but this moves so quickly. We cannot let inaccurate information stand. And you just have to move with the speed of these platforms. You also, I think, are using them still as aggregators, but in very different ways. So I worked a counterterrorism operation that we had to monitor social media accounts for folks on the ground in Syria to see what kind of out-of-ground reporting we were getting as a CT operation against an ISIS leader was underway. And similar to the bin Laden raid, you all have studied this and remember that there started to be tweets percolating from the bin Laden raid, people saying we were seeing flashbangs outside this compound in Abbottabad. That happened much more quickly on Twitter. And we had to, even though we had planned for that inevitability, knowing that it would happen, we still had to scramble in the middle of the night because there were outlets in Syria, actors in Syria that were starting to put out their own misinformation and disinformation about civilians have been killed, women and children have been murdered in this attack, when in fact it was a clean operation. No civilians that were present were killed in the operation. We were able to get all of our people out safely. And so we made, I think it was like a 4 a.m. call that the president had to address the nation the next morning. And that would not have happened without the proliferation of social media pushing us to be more active and in fact deciding we have to put the president out. This has now gotten so bad. The only way to correct this narrative is to have the president of the United States go out in a few hours and say this operation was a success as we had intended and planned for it to be.
Thank you.
I just got goosebumps. Go to her discussion.
I want to try to get in as many as we can. So let's go here.
Hello, I'm Darius Wagner. I'm a freshman in the college from Brooklyn, New York. I want to say welcome to the Hilltop and welcome back to the Hilltop, particularly for our fellows. As we discuss the health of politics and public service, I feel like we cannot ignore the state of democracy at home and abroad, particularly with election denialism and the insurrection. So particularly for our fellows in media, but it can apply to anyone else on the panel, oftentimes truth and responsibility are categorized as partisanship. How can we better navigate truth and partisanship to protect the state of our democracy?
Everybody's looking at me. Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, I obviously work for CNN, and CNN has gone through a few iterations over the last few years, starting with Donald Trump and putting him on air a lot during the 2016 campaign, something that the president of CNN later admitted was a mistake. And then, of course, being, some people would call it anti-Trump during Trump's presidency. And then now there's sort of a swing back at CNN towards what might be called both siderism or centricism, having Republicans on air. It's a struggle. I'm not sure that CNN always gets it right. Sort of if you look at what people actually want to watch, millions of people turn into Fox News, millions of people turn into MSNBC, and hundreds of thousands of people turn into CNN, right? We don't get the ratings that the other sides get, and that's a challenge. I mean, we obviously have a robust fact checker, Daniel Dale, who you've probably seen on our air. There were times when we would, for instance, when Donald Trump was in the White House, we would sort of fact check him in the chyron. I think at some point he said that Obama was the founder of ISIS, and we sort of put that in the chyron and said, this is a lie or false. I mean, this is an ongoing problem, primarily because there are people who are committed to lying, right? There are people, and Donald Trump, committed to creating an alternative reality that is based on his own imagination. And he has convinced millions of Americans of his worldview, right? If there's a recent poll out that I think said something like, Republicans believe him more than they believe other politicians, family members, and religious leaders, right? And so in terms of how CNN combats that, other than sort of fact checking, other than calling him out or whoever is not telling the truth, that's all we can do. And I don't think that is partisan. It's just the truth. This is a lie. The big lie is in fact a lie. Biden won the election. That isn't a partisan statement. It's just a fact. But it is an ongoing, I think, struggle for reporters, both in print and on air, and for practitioners, pollsters, and partisans on either side. This is kind of a new thing in American politics, where we have sort of one party that's led by a conspiracy theorist. And the press, I think, isn't always up to the job of covering that and the threat it poses to democracy.
Okay, let's go over here.
Hi, my name is Charles Orr. I'm a PhD student in the economics department. I listen to a ton of podcasts. All the podcasts will tell you the mainstream media is dead, and you should get on Substack, on Twitter, get all your information from there. So as folks who are sort of in the ecosystem, is that true? I'm not sure if that's just because it's in their interest to sort of continue to say that. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on whether or not most Americans are still getting their news from news sources like cable TV and newspapers. And if that is true, does it say something about our body politic, or does it say something about possibly power shifting away from media executives to on-air talent who can take their audience elsewhere and get more money for themselves, more or less? So the two-part addendum question.
I can take that. So the answer is no. It is not dead. You'll still see campaign budgets, and I'm in the middle of a campaign right now. I think some of you had a case study on it, the Kentucky gubernatorial race. The majority of our budget is still spent on TV. TV is still king. Now, you all are changing that. So as you get more involved, I think TV is going to become less and less important. But TV is still king. That's how you get your message out there. And a lot of times it's because the commercial will be controversial. Some of you may never watch broadcast TV, but you read about it. You hear your friends talking about it. That's how you get the message out there into the ether. I think the best example of this I've ever seen is even older than TV, everybody says, why do you send me so much mail? I hate all that junk in my mailbox. Like, how does that even work? And I sit you down in a focus group and say, what are you hearing about this race? They literally spit back what's in the mail. So yes, you throw it away immediately, but you spend 5 seconds and that message penetrates. It's true. So, and we see the same thing with TV. I don't watch TV. Hey, did you see what they're saying on the TV about Joe Biden? So it gets out there in the ether, but I think that will shift. The big surprise that we're seeing in real time that you guys can probably help educate me on is people getting news through YouTube. I go through YouTube to learn how to change that weird ring in my toilet. Like, I would never think of that as a news source. So I think that's something new that your generation is going to bring to our world.
Old people. My mom, YouTube all the time. Did you see this on YouTube?
My in-laws too. They get all their news from YouTube.
Yeah.
A good friend of, I think, several of us up here, Peter Hamby. Peter's was a longtime CNN person who now is over at Snapchat. He's the director of news at Snap. Wrote a piece a couple years ago in Vanity Fair that I thought was brilliant. He said, media may be dying, but journalism is thriving. And that it's just taking many different forms now, whether it is, some of the sources you mentioned, or the growing number of docuseries, right? CNN, like your nighttime lineup is all docuseries now.
That actually rates well.
Yeah, so it's just coming in different forms. All right.
Mo, one quick thing.
Yeah.
If you read the New York Times, the app, one thing that fascinates me, and I actually do think is troubling, is the top stories on the app are listed under a heading that says most popular. Not top news, most popular. And that feeds on itself. If we're talking about popularity in the news, you're going to a traditional news outlet or any news outlet to say what is important, not what's most popular. And if they're giving you what's most popular, then they're just creating this cycle that you're describing.
We're going to try to squeeze in 2 more. I'm sorry, but don't leave, because afterwards everyone's going to hang around and you all can come up and ask your questions individually.
Hi, I'm Raghav. I'm a freshman in the School of Foreign Service from New Jersey. Thank you very much for being here. My question is particularly for Ms. Horn because of your involvement in national security, but it could be for anyone. Did you ever feel like really fulfilled in your job, like you were really contributing to something, or did you feel more like constrained by toxicity around you or by like the whims of politics?
Yes. Yes to both. Also, by the way, please, Emily. Miss Horn is my mom. She's lovely, but she lives in northern Michigan, so you can call me Emily. Yes to both, sincerely. And you'll hear this from others. We were actually talking about it earlier today, and it's a truism in Washington for a reason. If you ever start to feel when you are in a position of public service, whether that is as a journalist, as a politician, as a staffer, as a bureaucrat, if you start to feel that the latter is outweighing the former, that your ability to serve, to be a part of something bigger than yourself, to feel that awe when you walk into the United States Capitol or the Pentagon or the White House, when that awe starts to be overcome by your exhaustion or your cynicism or your frustration with the grinding slow gears of our democracy, then it's time to take a break. Get out of the way, go do something else, go pick up some new tricks, let someone else have a bite at the apple. Because 1, this is a marathon, not a sprint, your career, and you need to stay fresh. You need to get out of your little bubbles and go to Silicon Valley or go abroad or go to academia or go to the private sector and keep yourself fresh and energized so that when you go back, and there's always a when, not an if, there's always a when in Washington if you want to after you get to a certain point. When you go back, you're refreshed, you have new energy, you have new ideas, and you have renewed that optimism and faith in our democracy that is frustrating and imperfect and toxic as it can be, that we're all here because we believe in it and we want to be a part of its success.
Okay, let's take one more and then we'll talk a little bit more.
Hi, my name is Diego Tejada, and I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm a freshman in the college. My question is for Cristobal. You mentioned that being Latino influenced your accomplishments and being a son of immigrants too, and your jobs and everything that you've accomplished. I'm an immigrant from El Salvador, and even at least in my family, I can see a movement or like a shift away from Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, and maybe not specifically to Trump, but to Republicans in general. So how do you think the Biden administration should better reach Latino voters, or maybe just POC voters in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. And it's something we're going to talk a lot about in our discussion group. It's a major issue right now. First thing I'll say is, I think you're this way too. You don't forget where you come from, right? So I was honored when I was sitting in the White House to have on my desk my grandfather's bracero papers, which were the papers that he was given to be able to come to the United States and pick cotton, right? And I take that in any job I've ever had and have it right on my desk. So you never forget, you're always grounded. And I will say, as someone who helped build and run the president's campaign, he committed to me personally at the very beginning that he wanted his campaign to look like the country. And if he were lucky enough to be elected president, he wanted his government to look like the country. And he kept those promises. It was the most diverse campaign ever, including with Latinos. If you look at the cabinet now, you've got a record for Latinos that's never happened before. And it's not just Latinos, it's throughout the administration. And that's important because people are policy. And the policies that the administration has put forth, I think for our community, for the Latino community, for immigrants, are among the best we've ever had as a nation, right? That doesn't mean that all Latinos are going to want to vote for him in the next election. I hope they do, but I can tell you from my own personal experience that there will be some that go the other way. And I think there's a lot of media these days that doesn't quite understand the nuance here, the subtleties here when we're talking about Latino voters. Latino voters, after the first generation, become essentially swing voters. We have to think about Latino voters the same way the media talks about white working class voters in Michigan or Wisconsin. That's the same way we have to think about Latino voters. You have to constantly fight for every vote. And the reason why we're having some challenges right now is because the Latino community, point here, is very young. Right? It's the youngest and fastest growing community in many respects. And so what that means is you have to constantly engage them. You've got to not just work to turn out Latino voters, but you've got to persuade them, right? They lean very heavily once you talk about the issues for Democrats. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But as a candidate or a company or whoever you're advising, you've got to be out there all the time talking to Latinos because they're just so fast growing. Final point, I don't mean to filibuster, but looking at my own family again, and I always want to come back to this because I forget who mentioned it earlier about storytelling, but it's important to just kind of think about where you're from. And if my mom's, she was one of 10, if they were all alive today, the brothers and sisters, 7 out of 10 would vote Democrat and 3 would vote Republican. We're not that far off from those numbers. But elections are so close now that you win in the margins, and that's what gets people very worried.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
I hope after hearing from them all, you know why I'm so psyched to have this particular class of fellows. 3 ways each of you can be involved, right? It's super easy. Number 1, just come. You don't have to sign up for anyone's discussion group. There's no registration. Just come, right? If you're totally into Craig, you can come to all 8 of his sessions, or you can pop in for 1 or 2, right? You can just come and be a part of the conversation. The discussion groups are off the record. So, they were holding back a little bit because there's a camera pointed at them today. There, they won't hold back. These are designed to be frank, open discussions. So just come. Number 2, they all will be holding office hours every week. If you go to our website, you can sign up for their office hours in advance. The office hours will shift sometimes from week to week, so just stay on top of it. But you can go to their pages on the site, sign up, and come talk to them. Continue the conversation you just started in a discussion group. Ask them for career advice. They are here to talk with you guys and to hear from you. And then 3rd, if that's not enough and you want to geek out just a little bit more with any of them, apply for their student strategy teams. Each one of the fellows is assigned a team of 5 students. These 5 students are here to work with them, to help facilitate the conversation in each week's discussion group, to help get the word out, to bring more students into the discussion groups, to put together some research or whatever the fellows need, but also, and more importantly, to advise them, right? You can say, if you're on a student strategy team, hey, Nia, talk a little bit less at the start next week. You can say to them, hey, we should mix up the
discussion group outline, because of this thing that's happening in the news right now, we should talk about that. You guys can help them facilitate the conversations in the room to make sure we're having the right conversations every week. Those applications to be on a student strategy team are live now. They are due Sunday night at midnight. You'll have a chance to tell us if there's a particular fellow you really want or a particular fellow you don't really want, or just rank them all. And then over the course of the next week, our team will work to try to make matches. Julia in the back is holding up a QR code. That's where you can find the application. Our Student Advisory Board Fellows chairs, who you heard from earlier, are going to stick around. If you want to talk to them about what the job actually means, they would be able to describe it far better than I could. But no, it's a big deal. Now, if you're interested in that and you don't get it, it's okay. We've got a whole new group of fellows coming in next semester. But still come to their discussion groups. You do not have to sign up. You do not have to be on a student strategy team to attend their discussion groups. So we're going to hang out for a little bit. Go check out along the wall some of the other things we do at the Institute. Talk to our fellows chairs to talk about that student experience in the discussion groups a little bit more. Come say hello, get your selfies with them, because I know so many of you, that's why you're here. And continue the conversation. Discussion groups are going to start, I think, in 2 weeks is when they actually start. So office hours will start next week. Discussion groups will start in 2 weeks. We hope to see you all there. Thanks so much. And thank you guys for being part of the Georgetown community. And thank you all for giving them a reason to want to be.